Well,
Enraged and ready to take on the world.
uh, okay.
Gentlemen, come out here.
Down the street, you can hear him scream your disgrace as he slams the door in his drunken face. And now he stands outside, and all the neighbors start to gossip and drool. He cries, "Oh girl, you must be mad. What happened to the sweet love you and me had?" And then he tunes on screen and starts a scene, and his tears fall and turn the garden green. And so castles made of sand melt into the sea.
I think so. Well, welcome everybody. Good morning to our Sunday, and welcome to our Sunday gathering. My name is Terry Ismert, and I would like to say that human hands solve human problems, and that reality is known through reason, and we're so glad you're here today, and we're so looking forward to our program. We'll start with Robert Kuhn, who's performing today under the name GALVEZTON. I don't know if you guys know the Galvez Hotel. It lives right near the Galvez, and Galveston's really cool. We just talked about it. It's the moniker that eclectic writer, indie rock and roll folk musician Robert Kuhn uses to release his music and perform under. 2022 also marked the release of his first book, Leaving is Returning, an autobiographical novel about the life and travel in Central and South American indigenous villages. His new album, Some Kind of Love, is a 9-song live tribute to the Velvet Underground and scheduled for release in 2004. With no further ado, we will welcome GALVEZTON.
Thanks, y'all. Start slow. The darkest days are done. Or have they just begun? Tell me. The feeling gets confused, using what we used to get through. And in the middle of the moment where it all is split into me and you, me and you. You and I are one. 100,000 suns remind me somewhere in between memory and a dream. You'll find me in once black time. She has spoken, and the words are coming true. Me and you, me and you. And in the middle of the moment where it all is split into me and you, me and you, me and you, me and you. Me and you, me and you. Thanks, y'all. And my name is Robert. I've played here several times. It's nice to see several familiar faces from over the span of different venues and different rooms. This community of people comes together in. Been keeping it. How long y'all been rolling for now? 10 years? More than 20 years? 15 years? 12 years? Oh yeah, cool. It's probably about that time somewhere in there when I just heard the name TC. I guess the first person I knew here. And from Galveston. We're putting on a lot of music down there. Outdoor music and festivals and stuff. I work with a group called La Izquierda. La Izquierda Surf and Music. And we put on an annual surf and music festival every year in the spring. A longboard surf competition and bands for a couple of days. And all the profits we make so far go to putting on more concerts in the parks and stuff. And we started meeting some folks. And there's a group called the Architects of America, AIA. Every year they come to Galveston and they put on a sandcastle competition. I don't know if y'all are familiar with it, but I just kind of was reminded of it. I said, maybe some of these folks are architects, or y'all know a little bit about it. But it's a pretty outstanding event where they all get together and make some out-of-this-world sandcastles. They've been doing it for 37 years. And a lot of people come from Houston. That's what I'm telling y'all. But this year, they called La Izquierda. They said, Robert, let's turn it into a music festival. I said, okay. So that's going down September 21st and 22nd. Down there, it's the first year they're gonna have a music and vendors and that kind of thing. Take my prisoner down to the waterside. I always said thank you before I go under, and they look at me like I am the madman. What if there was a place that we could go to? What if there was a way to get there? What if I surrender? Cranes of origami are hanging in the window. Despite what they say in the streets, they still look much the same. The landlords are selling, rents are raising. We got to keep on moving. What if there was a place that we could go to? What if there was a way to get there? What if there was a place that we could go to? Surrender. There was a place go to? What if there was a way to get there? What if there was a place that we could go to? What if there was a way to get there? What if I surrender? Thanks, y'all.
All right, thank you so much. That was wonderful. And that sandcastle building contest is amazing. And the fact that they're putting a music festival with it and that you'll be performing there, that's going to be really, really exciting.
There's probably going to be 10 bands or 20 bands throughout the weekend on Saturday. It's going to be a Saturday and Sunday event now. All kinds of things like that.
Do you know when?
Yeah, September 21st and 22nd. Lots of Galveston and Houston bands, Austin, artists, and yeah, people in the mix. It's gonna be quite a day. And then there's a local sandcastle competition on Sunday. It's only $10 entrance fee, winner take all pot. You bring your shovels and your pails. Anyone can enter. It's a family friendly. Local sandcastle competition on Sunday.
Oh, fun. Do we need an Oasis sandcastle?
Y'all should have an Oasis sandcastle.
Wouldn't that be fun?
Yeah, just pack it in, pack it out, whatever you bring in to make it with, and there'll be judges and everything to. So yeah, come represent.
Well, how fun. All right, thank you so much.
East Beach, yeah.
East Beach.
Which is the far east point you can go to. Galveston.
All right, definitely something to think about. All right, thank you again. We're going to have our community moment now. The person presenting that really needs very little introduction. His name is Dr. Richard Andrews. He has spoken for us many times, and we appreciate him being here. He has been a shoulder and an ear to listen for years for all the members of the community, and we really appreciate him coming and sharing once again with him. So with no further ado.
Shucks. Can somebody start a 10-minute timer? Because I will ramble, and I need somebody to hold 2 minutes, 1 minute. Otherwise, you'll be here for a long time. Okay, so all right. So let's see. I'm going to be talking mostly about hormones and only a little bit about opium and free will. Let's see here. Okay, hormones. We've all heard the term. What are they? Just as a review, chemical messengers in the blood. You know, when one part of the body wants to send a message through the blood to another part of the body to cause a certain action, that's a hormone, basically. And so we have like a thyroid hormone, for example. The thyroid makes thyroid hormone, and then that goes into different parts of the body and influences things like the speed of our metabolism. Are we burning things up faster or more slowly? Adrenaline is another example, insulin, estrogen, testosterone. The hormone disruptors, or endocrine is just another word for hormone, basically. When we're trying to confuse people in science, we say endocrine, but it's basically hormones. And so EDC stands for endocrine disruptor compounds or chemicals. And so anything that shouldn't be in the body, and we'll talk about that is it can either inhibit a hormone or influence it in some other way. For example, it can make it more exaggerated. It can mimic a hormone. And hormones are good. You know, we all like hormones. But if you have too many of them, or if they're being inhibited or stimulated or mimicked, then that's not necessarily such a good thing. So, there's a growing awareness of the health consequences of these chemicals in our environment. And this is not meant to be a downer type of presentation. I always like to end on an optimistic note. That's not the opium. That's going to be another optimistic note there. And amount of exposure to some of these compounds and nothing would happen, right? And at this point, we all have these compounds in our body. There's basically no way of being on planet Earth not having this stuff in your body. And so the question is not, is it in your body? It is. I mean, even in the eyeball, right? When they've done analyses of the fluid in the eyeball and what kind of microplastics, for example, that's one of the sources of these compounds, are in the eyeball. I won't talk about the other organs, but the eyeball, there were, the 3 microplastics found in the highest concentrations. The second one, I believe, was styrofoam. So I won't even tell you what the lead one was, but yeah, so you've got styrofoam in your eyeball as you're sitting there watching me. And, but again, it's not a question of is it in your body, it's a question of is it in there in a significant amount that's harmful to health. But there are ways, I think, of reducing your exposure to some of these compounds, and that's what I want to have a conversation about. It's not just me talking to you. I want to hear what you have to say also. And the source of some of these endocrine disruptor compounds or chemicals, now there may be other sources, but in particular I'm going to talk about fossil fuels. Most of us got here in a car, and so most of us have used fossil fuels at some point today because it's hard to get around that. But that's the source of the bulk of endocrine disruptor or hormone disruptor compounds in the environment. Some of that is, for example, when they take petroleum and they make additives out of it, and then they use the additives in various ways in various products. But even, for example, there are, even in something like shampoo or toothpaste, you wouldn't think toothpaste has microplastics in it, but it turns out microplastics are very useful because they make things slippery and one thing or another. So unless you know for sure that your toothpaste doesn't have microplastics in it, you're probably brushing your teeth with microplastics, as I did for many years. And I think the one that I've got now doesn't have microplastics. But of course I'm squeezing it out of a plastic tube, and so, but never mind. A toothpaste powder may be a good move. Tell me how that goes. And so various personal care products, and especially things that you put on your skin, again, they have these microbeads that they, because the plastics companies are always looking for ingenious things you can do. And plastic is, let's face it, an ingenious invention. And so they're always coming up with ways that plastics can be used so that they can sell more of these plastics. And as we, at least in theory, start to burn less fossil fuels for energy, I'm not sure that's happened yet, but I think there's been some movement in that direction. I'm being optimistic. Then the companies that produce petroleum, some of whom also have a plastics division, or at least they sell their plastics to plastics companies, or they sell their petroleum feedstock to plastics companies. And so they're kind of nervous about the idea that we won't be using as much fossil fuel for energy in the future, so you have to do something with all that oil. And so what are you going to do with it? Well, they're starting to ramp up the production of plastics, and so we really have to, I think, get involved on the policy side as well as on the side of the consumer. Consumerism drives a lot of stuff in this country especially. And the industry has been aware, this will sound very familiar to you, the industry has been aware of some of the health harms related to some of these endocrine disruptor compounds since the 70s, but of course didn't say anything, and then it finally came out in lawsuits where they were, the lawyers forced them to divulge some of their internal documents and that sort of thing. One of the things, you know, if it weren't for fracking, now you've all heard of fracking. Fracking comes from the word fracturing, in which hydraulic pressure is used to fracture certain kinds of rocks to release the oil. And if it weren't for fracking, which was invented in 1947, I was surprised to hear that it was that far back, but it really started to get big, in the 70s, 80s, 90s, that sort of thing. And so there would have been a peak of oil production except for fracking, and so now there's a lot more oil being produced. And so, so that's contributing to this overload of plastics and other endocrine disruptor compounds. So some of the impacts on health include fertility. This is one of the bright spots, actually, in the sense that it's going to be a good thing for the planet if humans can't reproduce as much. Oh, 2 minutes? Okay, thank you. Early puberty is another one. Puberty is a good thing, but early puberty, I don't think so. And various kinds of cancer, especially those cancers where hormones play a role. Even diabetes, obesity, heart disease. Now we can't blame all of those entirely on endocrine disruptor compounds, but they can at least contribute at the population level, right? And even decreases in IQ because it affects brain development, some of these compounds. So we talked about consumer habits and, okay, things you can do. I'm out of time, I realize. So I would say, you know, even tea bags, if you're putting those tea bags in your hot water, they did a study, and it you know, those little tea bags, which you think are paper, but they're not. In fact, the more paper-like it seems, the more plastic it's releasing into your hot water. And they found, I think it was 9 billion particles of microplastics when you plop one of those little tea bags. But if you put loose tea leaves into one of those metal strainer things, then you're not going to get any microplastics. So anyway, I think there are things we can do to reduce our plastic load. And I think we should share those kinds of, that kind of information, maybe at our potlucks and stuff like that. Maybe we can get together. I brought a couple of items. For example, this is a kind of soap that I bought that came in a paper package. This is for dish. Instead of having my plastic bottle with dish soap in it that I pour out and then I buy another plastic bottle, this comes in a paper package, and it's just soap that you take your brush and you brush your dishes with it and that kind of stuff. And I got that online. I'll give you that source. Okay, a couple quick things. The opium element, I'm almost done, is I'm reading a stunningly interesting book, which if you want to know about the colonialism in China, India, England especially, of course, was the superpower on colonial behavior, but the U.S. also. The book called Smoke and Ashes by Amitav Ghosh is absolutely fascinating. He's Indian, but he lives in the U.S., but he, you know, is always interested in looking at things that affect India and which India was involved in. As you may know, England went to war with China twice in order to force China to keep importing English opium, which was being grown in India. And that's why the British had Hong Kong, is because it was one of the things that China had to give up in connection with losing this opium war. It's just stunning history, Smoke and Ashes. And if you think you have free will, I encourage you, if you're brave enough, to read Determined, a book which will convince you, the science will convince you that, well, maybe you have 1% free will, maybe not. And I'm going to start a tradition here at Oasis, which is something that I'm going to suggest the name, although you can come up with a better name, the Houston Oasis Floating Library, Houston Oasis Floating Library, in which, if you're interested in this book, you can take it today. First person to raise your hand. Okay, back there, okay. But then when you finish reading the book, you bring it back to Oasis, and you don't just put it on a table and say anybody can take it. You have to hand it directly to another person. If you just put it on a table and say somebody can take it, then the volunteers will have to clean it up at the end of the thing. So you can only hand it directly to another person who will then keep it, read it, bring it back, and you can only hand it directly to another person. Okay, thank you very much.
Yes, always. Also, that's a great idea. Having been one of the people that helped move the books back when we had the library, that's a really nice way to do it because it was a lot of books to carry. I only did it like once. Other people did it every week. Anyway, we're going to break for a coffee break now. Thank you so much for that information. So much to unpack there. We're going to take a 10-minute coffee break, come back, and we will hear from Dr. Kallhoff. So see you soon.
styrofoam eyeballs. Burn the baby's breath past the serenade where the worlds collide. Everything was made. You and I shall be the golden dawn who will take our places, always running races. And the falling down is getting up, and the ceremony begins. In the diamond mine where the roads are blocked, grandmothers cry on their piles of stones. You and I shall see the last in line, always running races with our sunken faces. And the falling down is not getting up, and the ceremony ends. Lastly comes the part when the light appears. Take us all away from the death we feared, when there's no turning back deep inside our veins. Here we go again, here we go again. And the ones who know are not whispering, and the strong are buried by the weak. Yeah.
Thank you so much. All right. So now we're going to move to our main talk. Dr. Verena Kalhoff, PhD, will give a talk entitled Biotechnology, its applications and the future of the bioeconomy. She serves as the Senior Director of Global Life Sciences at the Greater Houston Partnership, where she initiated and leads the task force on synthetic biology. A geneticist by training and ecosystem builder by profession, Verena is focused on understanding and guiding how new technologies impact communities. And she is the mother of my 4 favorite tortoises who live in her backyard in an amazing condominium. All right, and with no further ado, come up and share with us.
Thank you. All righty. It's really exciting to be talking to you guys about some stuff that I've been somewhat passionate about for quite a while. Many of you may know that I actually moved to Houston a little over 20 years ago to go to Baylor College of Medicine and study molecular and human genetics. After leaving graduate school, after finishing graduate school, I very much took a little bit of a roundabout, went into business, and found really my place in the whole ecosystem building piece of working with individuals who are developing a technology. How do they find the resources, the people, the knowledge, the understanding of the industry to actually make their idea applicable to what we do in everyday life, to actually find the problem for their technology. Oftentimes we tell people, well, you gotta, if you have a hammer, everything looks like a nail. You have to find the problem that your technology really solves. And building the ecosystems in which people can come together and understand how their technology fits in that has been pretty much where I've been for the better part of the last 15 years. I am now with the Greater Houston Partnership, thinking about it much more from a perspective of all the way from idea to Fortune 500 companies. What are the implications for a region? What are the implications in terms of workforce, et cetera? When it comes to biotechnology, it is technology that is obviously based on biology. We have been using this technology for quite a while in a number of different ways. I don't know how many of you remember, well, nobody really remembers, I don't think, the times when diabetes was a terminal diagnosis, when we did not yet have any treatments for diabetes. Around the 40s or 50s or so, we realized if we isolate insulin out of the pancreas of pigs or bovine sources, then we could administer that to diabetics and actually extend their lives. Now, there's a little bit of a problem with that, because the pancreas, out of a complex being, has a lot of impurities in it. And so to actually get it to a point where it was pure enough to safely administer was a little bit of a problem. There were some issues with that associated, but still, that insulin was yet better than not having any of it at all. Now, in the, I think it was 87, yeah, 87, a company, Genentech in San Francisco, developed a way by which they had isolated insulin, the gene for insulin, out of the human genome, inserted it into E. coli, and they were now growing this protein in a much less complex organism. Out of those bacteria, you could isolate insulin, thus making it possible to administer much more safely to diabetics. And that's, in essence, utilizing biotechnology. You take the gene out of one organism, insert it into bacteria, yeast, algae, what have you, or use whatever they do and amplify or select for products that these microorganisms make anyway, and you grow that up to a volume that actually makes sense for human production. Now, one of the things that I always try to be very mindful of is that anything we do today with technology really is we're standing on the shoulders of giants. None of this would be possible. Oh, this looks really terrible, doesn't it? Okay, well, the evolution of genetic techniques, none of this wouldn't have been possible if it wasn't for the development of the microscope, right? If you don't have a microscope, you can't detect cells. I think this was 1665, when they first started describing cells. Then you get to Gregory Mendel, who's describing that somehow parents pass their characteristics on to offspring. Now, we kind of all knew that, but that was the first time when there was actually that scientific experiment with a hypothesis of what might happen and the whole discovery that something was being transmitted. You get on to, the discovery of chromosomes, right? Well, remember at this point, we did not yet know what the chromosomes were good for, but we discovered that there is this thing called a chromosome. We started visualizing them and got all the way into 1953 when, well, I had to put Rosalind Franklin in there. Of course, they only mentioned James Watson and Francis Crick at the discovery of how the DNA was actually shaped. Developing sequencing methods for actually going in and being able to say this is the sequence of the base pairs within the chromosome. And jumping a little bit ahead to a time when I started getting into biology, when the Human Genome Project was declared in 1993, right about the time I entered graduate school, we declared that we had sequenced the human genome. They have declared that repeatedly since then, and part of it is that by 2003, they had actually done a lot of the easy sequencing of it. But the genome, the human genome, is fairly complex. There's a lot of very hypercoiled areas, especially when you get into the places where the arms of the chromosomes overlap. Those are very tight areas, and it's really difficult to sequence them without actually destroying the molecule that you're dealing with. But all of this kind of led up then to actually our ability to to remove and insert DNA in a much more precise fashion. In 2012, CRISPR-Cas9 was very much, well, again, it was a number of different papers, discoveries that had led up to this CRISPR-Cas9 complex, enzymatic complex, to be able to make very precise incision into the DNA to insert things or to remove things. Up until this point, we had been using what we call restriction enzymes. Restriction enzymes are what I used in graduate school to remove genes or insert genes. And the problem with them is that you can't 100% control where they're going to go, because they have a number of different sites. But so the ability to cut out and insert larger fragments of DNA with precision then allowed for much more knowledge of this is actually what we did. Now, insulin, I showed you, happened before CRISPR-Cas9. But insulin is a very short gene. It's 2 small protein sequences that are linked relatively simply. Now, with CRISPR-Cas9, we can do things that are much more complex. So this is really, we've been doing biotechnology, biomanufacturing, but we're getting to a very, very different scale nowadays. In essence, some of the terms that you'll be hearing within this is bioreactors, and that is in essence fermentation flasks. With all of this stuff, it is initially tested out in flasks, in small little flasks on a benchtop. But if you want to do anything in commercial scale, you're going to have to grow that up in order to make it worth your while, in order to make it efficient, in order to be able to produce the quantities that you're going to need. So oftentimes you're going from a shake flask, a small flask that we would know out of the laboratory, all the way to 2,000, 20,000 liter fermenters in order to be doing much larger scale production of proteins that you're growing up in a system, in a microorganism that doesn't generally produce them, but with your modifications, it is producing that. It relies very heavily on a number of different feedstocks, corn, soy, waste products. There's a ton of different things that are out there. Now, of course, we've been doing fermentation for a while, right? Some of you, probably not all, have tried beer before. And beer, of course, yeast and a number of feedstock that go into it. But what's the different there is with yeast, we have selected for the yeast strains that will taste the best, historically. With this stuff, we can actually say, hey, we want you to make this particular protein. We insert it into the bacteria or the yeast or whatever it is, and we're gonna produce what we want rather than just taking advantage of what this particular organism did already anyway. There's a number of different uses for this. Obviously, in human health, I talked to you about insulin. We're doing this for other things as well, especially when it comes to treatment of cancers. So there's a lot of cell and gene therapies where you take cells out of an individual, modify them in the laboratory, and insert them back to actually attack the cancer of that particular individual. We are using it for disease detection, and of course you've all heard of the mRNA vaccines that became very popular a few years ago. But this is also now being used in pretty much all industries, to be honest with you. Energy, petrochemical. Richard, thank you very much for providing a nice introduction of what some of the issues with plastics are. There is a lot of work in replacing traditional plastics with products that have similar qualities, that have similar uses, but fewer of the environmental and health impacts. Sustainable aviation fuel, there's actually a company here in town that has inked a deal with United Airlines to deliver several million gallons of sustainable aviation fuel over the next few years. Synthetic fibers. There's even companies that are growing mushrooms to be modified and in essence, replacing leather products, right? So that you're no longer having to take the leather from cows or something else, but you're modifying the mushrooms as they're growing up, processing them to give you the quality that leather would typically have. We're also doing this in fine chemicals. There's obviously, especially for the Houston industrial ecosystem, both petrochemicals and fine chemical manufacturing are huge industries in our region. And so we can actually make a lot of this stuff using biotechnology in concept, not necessarily in large application. So here's one of the issues. There's actually a lot of conversation around the ethics of germline modification in human beings. As a community, geneticists very much shy away from actually modifying, treating humans to be passing on the genetic modifications that was imposed upon them through some sort of treatment. So yeah, we can talk a little bit more about that later. Of course, agriculture, there is obviously with fertilizers today, there's a lot of runoff. There is a lot of the fertilizer that actually ends up impacting our aquatic systems. There are ways to be producing fertilizers that has much less of an impact, or even giving the plant the ability to produce its own nitrogen or whatever it may need out of the soil, out of what's available in the soil, and actually be incorporating that right there. So lots of applications. The bioeconomy is in essence the entire products and services that are of the economy that are based on this biotechnology. It's predicted to be a key component of the future of our economy. I've already talked a little bit about it being so cross-cutting, up to $4 trillion per year globally over the next 10 years, and that is out of a report that was issued a couple of years ago. So tremendous impact. Now, of course, when I look at that, I see a potential impact if we don't, as a region, stay on the ball for our region, right? We all remember probably what happened in Detroit when the manufacturing of automobiles went somewhere else. A lot of manufacturing has already been offshored, but we still have quite a huge amount of it here in the Houston region. With the rise of the bioeconomy, there is a potential that this will impact employment in our region. So my thinking is, well, let's grow it here, right? So there's definitely the SynBio task force that Terry mentioned that we have at the Greater Houston Partnership very much looks at exactly this issue. How do we grow it here to make sure that we have continued jobs, good jobs, well-paying jobs, and continued prosperity for our region? The bioeconomy in many respects, biotechnology in many respects is still in fairly early stages, which is great for us. It gives us an opportunity to foster organizations, companies here that are growing this. Goodness, these slides did not come across very well. Down here we're having, in essence, the ability to make small amounts in smaller batches for applications like in human health. You don't need millions upon millions of kilograms of a particular product if you're giving micrograms of it to a human being. Now, you will need huge amounts if you're producing sustainable aviation fuels. But so in human health, we've been doing quite a bit. But as you're scaling, as you're needing larger containers, as you're needing to produce commodity products that have a very small margin of actually making money off of it, you're going to have to become really good at this whole scaling process from that I talked to you about earlier, where you start out with a flask on the bench, now you're trying it in 10 liters, now you're trying it in 200 liters. You're going all the way up to 20,000 liters. As you can imagine, you're doing this to an organism, right? There's a E. coli, there's a bacterium in this. Well, they need a particular environment. If you have them in a 20,000 liter fermentation tank, well, the pressure is very different than it was in the flask. The ability to get oxygen, carbon dioxide, et cetera, in there, and the ability to actually feed these microorganisms changes drastically. And so it takes a lot of skill to be scaling up. And it also takes a lot of money to be scaling this up. If you think about it, yeah, I can buy all sorts of flasks, but if I'm looking for a stainless steel vessel that holds 20,000 liters, and I need to make it up there, well, that's millions of dollars of investment. And hopefully, we're only going to be needing this for about 3 months at a time, right? And so that investment becomes huge. That is also part of what we're working on right now. There's a ton of folks across the United States that are looking at how do we best provide that opportunity for companies, for ideas to scale. Well, absolutely.
They're more concerned with their bottom line than with your health.
So absolutely, and I mean, certainly pharma companies are acting in that earlier range, right? They're very much at the realm where we're using cell and gene therapies, et cetera, to treat cancers, to treat rare diseases, et cetera, et cetera. Some of the larger companies, of course, they want the larger things, yes. But because this is such tremendous opportunity, the federal government has actually released the executive order on advancing biotechnologies and biomanufacturing. It is a fascinating document. If you ever want to go to sleep, feel free to pull it up. But it is, in essence, to bolster and coordinate federal investments across key research areas and overall improve our quality of life, improve the way we do things, but at the same time, make sure we're staying competitive, make sure we are having the ability to produce here in the country what we will need in order to be less dependent on international shipping. I think we all know. I don't know how many of you all ran out of toilet paper, but we want to be able to be sure to have the capacity to manufacture what we need. And so that then led to federal efforts, the bold goals for U.S. biotechnology and biomanufacturing. The first one was, in essence, the Biden administration saying we really ought to pay attention to this, and here is why. This paper, the goals, is very much into this is where we are going to be putting our efforts. Climate, food and agriculture, supply chain, health, those are some of the main goals that they released, in essence, and that then led to several federal agencies going in and saying, okay, here are the ways we are going to be supporting this. So oftentimes what happens is that the federal government says, hey, yeah, this is a great idea, we really should be doing this, but then how do we actually make sure that this gets actually implemented? And a lot of that is by supporting financially and otherwise the organizations, the startup companies and other organizations that are facilitating that growth, right? So the Department of Energy has a number of different initiatives and grants that are available to companies that are doing things that are very much aligned with their efforts. And so they will provide grants for, let's see here. Well, in general, their strategic objectives, the decarbonization of transportation, decarbonization of industry, and a number of other things. And so they will have calls for applications and provide funding to startup companies. The USDA is also, has also already released a number of opportunities, very much focused on the development of the circular bioeconomy. In general, the Biden administration is very concerned about making sure that we are that we are enabling the lifting of individuals across the entire United States, and that is urban centers as well as rural regions. Rural regions have very much been, excuse me? You did say the 5 million? Yes, that is what I said.
That won't happen in the future if we have a Trump administration? Do we hold our comments down? Okay.
So the USDA has a number of different ways by which they're supporting these efforts as well. And then, of course, international efforts. There has been a tremendous amount of international pressure. We all feel the impacts of climate change. I'm a gardener. This summer, my yard looks very different from what it did last year. Things are just getting, very interesting. But of course, weather, climate, anyway, so COP28, 200 nations signed on to reducing fossil fuel consumption. 4,100 companies have in essence said that they will reduce have reductions in emission targets, and 2,600 companies have net zero emission commitments over the next decade plus. Now this kind of drives our decision makers to actually make, foster the development of whatever needs to happen. There are a number of countries that already have a lot of plans for the bioeconomy. The US is actually a little bit, well, definitely not on the forefront of this. China has been having this as part of their 5-year plan for, I want to say, 15 years. And I'm actually not quite sure why they are shown as a country that has a BE-related strategy. But one of the things that has certainly happened is we have outsourced a lot of our manufacturing to China, right? And they have also been part of developing a lot of the newer technologies. And they see where industry is going. So they've really been supporting a lot of this development there as well. Of course, other countries have as well. The UK has made quite a number of investments, Spain as well as other countries. So they're all very much aware of this. And to address your question around administration change, there is certainly concerns around, hey, if the administration changes, what has already been sent to the different federal agencies to be dispersed, that is unlikely to be taken back. The question is, what will come afterwards? How is this going to, going to be maintained as well? So that was a really high-level overview of the biotechnology, bioeconomy, et cetera. More than happy to talk until next Sunday, but I don't think anybody really wants to hear that much detail. So with that, more than happy to take questions. Yeah.
What is the role of AI and biotechnology development? And also, have there been any examples of hallucinations by the computers?
Okay, so AI, when you say hallucinations, are you talking about AI hallucinations?
Yes.
Okay, very good. So here's the thing. Yes, there is a lot of work that is being done that will leverage AI because AI can see implications a lot quicker than we could deduce them with experiments. So yes, that is absolutely being leveraged. In many respects, I see AI as, 10, 20 years from now, it's like, oh, I'm using a computer to send email. I'm using AI to actually streamline what I am making, to actually test some of the cases before I actually go to the benchtop and test these things out. Benchtop testing is a lot more expensive, requires a lot more resources, so let's hash this all out, and then try the best candidates. We do that for drug development. We definitely do that for a number of other areas as well. There are companies who are making plastics in microbes. They're certainly trying to figure out how do we go through the entire process with the biggest yield in order to be actually commercially viable, and they are using digital twins and the whole understanding of how this all interplays and how things change with taking into consideration a lot more constraints and factors. So yes.
Yeah, in the federal budget here, are there funds dedicated in any way to addressing the general public's fear of genetically modified organisms?
So there's actually, I'm glad you're mentioning that. The federal government actually has is it a task force on national biosecurity? They are very closely looking at how do we make sure we govern this whole area in a way that makes sense. Part of their effort is education of the public on the bioeconomy and biotechnology as well. So I think there's always going to be a back and forth around this. It is part of the reason why we wouldn't do germline modifications, certainly not on humans. It's all part of that conversation, and there is actually a part of the, oh goodness, I think it's, there is a whole group of people who are very much looking exactly at the security implications, the way the individuals are going to be taking it up, education, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, I mean, there's funds behind that as well. I'm not sure that there is grants for groups across the United States that you could apply for to do some of that work. I do not know.
Next question.
Yeah, I would like first to apologize for interrupting your talk a while ago. I'm new here. I'm liable to say that to a preacher in a church. So anyway, I am concerned because you mentioned the USDA and the Department of Energy, which in the Republican platform, they'll get rid of both of those. So I'm wondering, will the companies do anything to bypass that in any way? Well, if they're not receiving funds, there's not a whole lot they can do.
Well, I mean, getting rid of departments isn't quite as easy. But yes, please be aware of Project 2025. Understand the implications that the government can have on our lives. I am working with a number of companies to go to Austin to educate our legislature on what biotechnology, the bioeconomy actually is. So yes, we're definitely having the conversations. They're happening all over. Yeah. Susan?
Oh, thank you. Oh, I guess my question is a little bit related, but I'm concerned about the existing financing, the economy of the current ways of doing things. And the big companies, the big that are already making money might be resisting a whole lot what you're talking about, and then the funding that would be coming from the federal government and the power that these large companies already have.
Yeah. So it's always a little bit of a back and forth there, right? So most companies don't want to be blockbuster. And so they're actually very much keeping tabs on what innovation is currently developed. So they actually have venture teams, corporate venture teams will go around and scout new innovation, seeing what is coming up in the market, what they might want to invest in to later absorb through a merger, acquisition, or whatever that may be. However, I've been around the innovation ecosystem for long enough to know it isn't always the best technology that wins. It isn't always technology that is great can be shoved aside by a company that has way too much power and thinks it's going to cut into their bottom line. That wouldn't be the first time that happens. In most respects, companies, in my understanding from what I see, they understand this is coming. They're trying to figure out how that fits with their business model. At this point in time, for a lot of the chemical companies, the margins just aren't there yet, right? So a lot of it is investing into companies, into startup companies that scale that process. They're all trying to be flexible and think long-term as well. But yeah, I mean, we don't have a crystal ball. Nobody's the puppet master who can actually say, oh yeah, you're only going to, well, this is definitely going to happen. There's always a little bit back and forth.
Next question. Yes, can you clarify more about the relationship between biotech and renewable energy?
Sure. So, and we could probably have a full talk on that, and I'm not sure I'm the best person to best qualified to talk around a lot of the energy. In essence. In essence, there is, because of the carbon footprint of a lot of the energy, aviation fuels, fuel in general, et cetera, there has been a big push to do things differently. What some of the companies are doing now is that they have developed microorganisms to be producing, is it green hydrogen or blue hydrogen or clean hydrogen? They have different terminologies that I can't seem to exactly tell apart, but different ways of producing hydrogen, different ways of producing fuels that have similar properties, that when currently they do a lot of mixing of fuels in order to make sure that they still maintain the properties of that we need in order to fly, etc. But yes, you're using microbes to use a different feedstock to be making fuels. You're using microbes to make hydrogen. You're using microbes to even clean out fossil fuel reservoirs that we couldn't use before, that had to go dormant because we just didn't have the technology to actually extract things. So there's a ton of different approaches to being a lot more responsible, environmentally responsible.
So I kind of have two questions, if I may. So to kind of jump in further on that, and forgive me if I'm incorrect in my phrasing with it. So would that mean to say that as far as for like, just like on a broader ecosystem kind of way, that things like airplanes, that they might be able to help with like the basic environment, such as like with the weather patterns, like with Houston, like how we go through the hurricanes, and kind of shifting it to where we have it more that it's doing a more net good, so to speak. I know I'm being so vague, and I'm so sorry. And then my second question is for someone like me who works in the electrical field. So like I'm a first-year electrician. Are there any things that we can do as people in the trades to kind of help the efforts to kind of bring Houston back to like a healthier environment or a more literally climate safe environment while this process is going on?
Yeah. In many respects, for individuals in the trades, and I'm sorry, I forgot your first question already. We'll get back to that. But I think for everybody, within your background, within your work, to understand all the new things that are coming up, so it would be very important. So for you in particular, understanding a lot of the alternative energy sources, right? And understanding how that can be implemented either in a commercial or in a residential building, and kind of thinking a little bit, bringing your expertise, your knowledge of what the businesses require from an electrical supply, and bringing that back to where the innovation is coming from right now, because oftentimes, like I mentioned before, teams have great ideas, but they don't understand the industry. So they're building a startup around a technology without really understanding what are the biggest things that the industry measures in order to implement something, to utilize something. So bringing some of that real world expertise back to that, and of course, bringing it forward to your customers, of, hey, there's this new thing that we're using nowadays. I mean, I'm still waiting for a solar clad house that just feeds directly into everything. That'd be excellent. But yeah, thinking a little bit, oh, they're doing this, I'm doing that. How does this all fit together? So I definitely encourage everybody to think a little bit outside of the box. how you can actually leverage some of the really new technologies as well. And I didn't address your question about hallucinations of AI, right? Actually, once you have an AI that has come up with a solution, you go to the bench anyway to test it out. And so if the AI has made up some stuff that just didn't make sense, it's going to fail at the bench, and you're never going to develop it further. I think so too. Thank you all.
Well, I think we've been given a lot to think about today. Thank you both, Richard and Verena, for sharing your knowledge, and you've given us a whole lot of interesting and challenging things to talk about and think about. Before we hear another song, we have a few announcements. Lunch today is at Cura Revolving Sushi Bar, and you can see it all in your... We are wanting Oasis cookbook recipes. We're going to be making a cookbook, so those of you that have cookbook, have lovely deliciousness you bring to the potlucks or other recipes you have that you want to share, we would love to have that. What do they do? Let me look. They send them to Verena at HoustonOasis.org. Oh, yes, it says that right here. And I want to take a second to see, does anybody have anything that has happened in their lives this last week or recently that they'd like to share? Something exciting, something fun, something challenging, anything? Yes?
Can you tell us about people who might have new jobs that they're interested in?
Oh, well, there's two of us in here right now that have new jobs. Georgia and myself, we both starting at new schools, right? She's at Spring Forest Middle School. And?
Yeah, I accepted a job in Tennessee, and unfortunately we'll be going to Tennessee next month.
Oh, but congratulations, Richard. This is wonderful for you. We will miss you terribly. But
Here's book number 2 for the Oasis floating library. It doesn't sound very interesting. A book called Salt is stunningly interesting. Oh, you got it? Okay. All right, very good.
awesome. And I have a new job. A former student of mine approached me to work with him in the private sector, and I'm so excited to be able to accept a job working at Houston Christian High School, being their head theater director. And so, very excited. Anyway, and it's really going to be a wonderful opportunity. Anybody else? Health, happiness. Yes.
Been in Kazakhstan for 2 months. Had an amazing trip. Actually stayed at 2 different mansions. There's big stories attached to those. Made a trip down to Uzbekistan, where I was sitting along, tag along for a meeting, but got looped into putting together a cardiogenetics course for the Ministry of Health down there. So been busy. At some point, my wife and I will do a presentation on the trip to Kazakhstan.
We would love that. We would love that.
We're new to this Oasis. Can you tell us a little bit about it, what it is about, this community?
Oh, it is a community of people who, help me, Verena, help me. She's the good speaker.
I'm not so sure about that, but I mean, in essence, Oasis is very much a community for folks who don't subscribe to what is preached in churches, etc. So for secular folks, or for folks who just prefer a little bit of a more secular approach to life, our core tenets, our core values are over there. People are more important than beliefs. We're very much open to embracing the diversity, to embracing where everybody comes from, understanding. There's also one of my favorite ones is human hands solve human problems, and meaning comes from making a difference. So volunteerism, contributing, giving back to society, but overall just having a community that learns from each other's experiences, that comes together on Sundays and other days for Sundays for the gatherings and for sharing some lunch, and for volunteerism across the year as well. Does that capture it?
And love. Lots of love. With that, thank you, Verena. With that, we will go to our final song, and then we'll have a couple of little announcements at the end, and we will head out.
All right, y'all. I also wanted to add a little something to the pot here. I have a book that was published last year, and I'd like to donate one to the free floating library at the Oasis. I think that's a great idea. The book's called Leaving is Returning. It's an autobiographical novel about adventures in South and Central American villages, in which boats became a very large part of my life in many different aspects, and that's what this song's about. Met you, and it was all a dream. Then when I awoke, I'd forgotten everything. I saw the lightning strike, I heard the thunder roll. The only thing that matters now is love. But you're changing. Well, I'm changing too. It's what we're all going through. And I'm grateful for everything we have, but I've had enough. I'm going out on a boat. Talking, they all say they know the truth. The only thing I know is that I am confused. They tell us what to think, they tell us what to say. I'm feeling like somewhere on the road we've lost the way. But you're changing. Well, I'm changing too. It's what we all do. And I'm grateful for everything we have, but I've had enough. I'm going out on a boat. Time to pass, but it passes slow. So I'm standing on the shore, but I ain't gonna wait no more. I'm going out on a boat. Thanks, y'all.
That song reminds me of my childhood in Galveston, riding on a boat with my dad all the time. I want to be on a boat too, Robert, right now. So a couple of things. We need you to support this community financially with your presence here, with your love, with your caring for each other in community. So if you can, please donate. There's lots of ways to. You can look on the back of this. You can become a recurring donor. You can be a one-time donor, whatever. Do what you can when you can. We really appreciate that. And, I was thinking, what is this community about? And because I'm not good at right at the top. But when I thought about it, what it is, it's you are welcome here, whatever your belief system is, and you will be loved and accepted, period. That's basically what we're about. So welcome. Anyway. With that, let's go to lunch. Have a great, wonderful week, and we'll see you next week. Oh, can I say one more thing? Thank you to everyone who spoke, and thank you to our volunteers who do everything to make things so beautiful every day when we arrive. Thank you. Always forget to do that.